Hello, everybody. It is a pleasure and honor for me to be joined today with Husnah Kukundakwe, who is the youngest Paralympian in the Tokyo Paralympics at the age of 14. She's still 14. She's going to be turning 15 in less than 2 months. Husnah, it's an absolute pleasure to have you joining us today.
It's an absolute pleasure to be able to talk to you. I'd love to come to the US one day, and I can't wait to have this conversation with you.
Well, you're always welcome. We're, of course, based here in the Washington area, but we do get to travel a little bit as well. But next time in the United States, you definitely need to make a stopover in Washington, D.C. anyway. But I'd like to kick it off with just a quick introduction from you, if you don't mind, for people who might not be familiar with your amazing story. Tell me how, of course, you were born with some disabilities, but you found swimming at the age of 3. Tell me about that.
My journey as a para swimmer originally began when I was 10, but my journey as a swimmer it began at 3 years old in kindergarten when I was training at the school pool. Back then, my parents weren't exactly into the idea of me swimming, but I kept insisting, and they learned to accept it, even though they were taking very, very huge safety precautions. But then I showed them that I can just feel free in the water and not drown. So I started competitive swimming at the age of 6 at my first competition. There I did my first race very, very well from my perspective. Maybe from the teacher's perspective, it wasn't as good. But then when it came to my second race, I was discriminated. So I wasn't allowed to do the race that I was supposed to do. I was swapped for someone else, which back then I didn't know was discrimination. I thought it was because, she's faster than me, so I just had to accept that. And I was disappointed. And then later on, I realized that isn't something you should do to someone. And
I'm sorry, you were how old when this happened?
When I was 6 years old in primary school.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. I'm assuming, it's just an assumption that this is from maybe, and this was, of course, every year things are evolving, right? And hopefully in the right direction. Do you think that was based out of just not knowing better? Was it intolerance? Because, when you use the word discrimination, of course, it's a very strong word, right? And I totally agree with you and understand from you, but what do you think was the kind of reason for that? Because I always like to kind of better understand what the other person or people are coming from to be able to then combat that kind of discrimination. In your mind, was it just that people just didn't know better? What do you think?
Now that I think of it now, I think it's because she didn't know better. Because I was basically like almost the only disabled kid in my school, in my class. And maybe she thought she was putting too much pressure on me, but my knew I wanted to do the race. So when I found out that I was swapped for another girl, I wasn't too happy about it, that I left that competition immediately. And I stopped swimming for a while and tried all the other sports, which I loved them, but they just didn't feel right for me. So I just found my way back to swimming, which is what I've always loved.
And, how difficult is it we'll get to kind of your day-to-day routine, which we were just talking about before the fireside chat starts, but, especially back then when you were in a 6 and then getting, a little older, it's an assumption, and forgive me for an assumption. I'm assuming it's not easy to be training as a swimmer in Uganda. Is that correct?
Yes, it's not easy because I have school, I have so many other different activities that I have to be a part of. So balancing that kind of life is very difficult because I have swim training at 4 a.m. when the pool is available, but even sometimes at that time it's not available. So sometimes I don't even train, which is kind of a setback because I have to keep training. And I have to go to school, which is from 7:30 to like 3:30 in the afternoon. And then I have to, as soon as I finish my classes, I have to go straight back to the pool, which is and I start training at 5 p.m. up to 6:30. So, and then the journey from the pool back home is about an hour. So basically,
Wow.
It's very tiring, and because I have to reach home and then have supper, maybe do some homework, and then go to sleep, which would
So,
take me about 1.5 hours. So I'll be sleeping a little late. But I'm kind of starting to get a hold of the routine, and
sure.
maybe in
And
the future I'll have a much better routine.
I mean, what do you do? Do you get 5 hours of sleep in total? I mean, is that a day? Like, how much
Um,
do you sleep?
Most of the time I sleep for about 7 hours,
Okay.
which I think is
Okay.
enough.
Okay.
But I know that I'm supposed to be getting about 8 to 9.
Right.
But I try to make those 7 hours work.
Right. So let's take a second before, getting you, of course, to Tokyo and the Paralympics, with the coronavirus hitting the world. How was it in Uganda as far as also specifically about training, where you even said, you sometimes have to compete for the pool itself, at 4 a.m. Did you face even bigger challenges during the coronavirus ahead of getting yourself to Tokyo?
Yes, there were very many challenges because that was when I had just begun high school, and it was going to be a whole new training season after I'd come back from the championships. So I thought, the first 2 weeks of training were going well. I was following the routine just right. But then when it came to the lockdown, everything was shut down for like the first 2 weeks. I thought, hey, this isn't going to last too long. Maybe it's just like a normal flu. And then when I started seeing it going on and on, the lockdown keeps going and everything is shut down completely, all swimming pools, all hotels, everything just completely shut down. I was starting to get very worried because during the lockdown, I was, kind of sure that I'm doing the right amount of dry land to keep me fit and prepared for when I go back into the pool during those first 2 weeks, because we had regular training sessions. Because I was still doing some Zoom classes, and in the evenings, my coach would set up like a Zoom dryland session. So those kept going for like 2-3 weeks, and then it became 2 months, and then I was starting to get worried whether or not
Of
the
course.
Paralympics are still going to be there, because I hadn't gone to maybe try to get a qualification event, because I knew, yes, I was going on a wild card, and I was still very, very excited about that. But when I learned that the Paralympics were going to be postponed, I was sad, but at the same time, I always like to look on the bright side so that, you kind of have the motivation to try something that you haven't, to try to do better. Exactly. So I
Amazing.
used the opportunity that the Paralympics were extended to try to get better in my time so that I actually do qualify for the Paralympics and go there when I actually qualified. So the lockdown was really, really bad in terms of my fitness, my swimming, maybe techniques and stuff like that. But the dry land helped out a lot, jogging around in the morning and basically trying to keep positive during the quarantine really helped me out. But overall, it was a very challenging experience.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point, just now, because from athletes to students, the coronavirus, of course, is also known to have had an adverse effect on mental health as well, right? Whether
Yeah.
it's in youth or in um, you know adults as well. And the fact that you kept this incredibly positive can-do attitude, I mean, is just incredible, because it's not easy to do. It really
Yeah.
isn't. But do you think your disciplined approach, the fact that you're so used to being training for such long hours, the resilience that you have, do you think that helped in having that kind of mental strength as well?
Yes, I really did. I really think it helped, because if I wasn't staying positive, I probably would have even just stopped the dryland workouts, and I would have given up on the fact that I'm ever going to the Paralympics. But because I love the sport that I do, and I really want to see it come out well in the end, I do everything that I can for it to do my best in the sport and maybe make an impact on someone else who may be facing the same challenges that I face. So me solving the challenges that I am in right now could maybe inspire someone else to not be negative about stuff, to not be afraid to follow their dreams, to not be unmotivated, basically. Just to keep moving forward and just be resilient.
Well, I told you, Husna, before we even started the live session that, you're an inspiration to me. And I told you about, my older daughter who has some disabilities. So you've already, touched the lives of two people here in the US at least, but I know you've also been touching, hundreds, if not thousands of people as well. And I agree with you that, it's all about the impact, right? The positive message that you're portraying. And you, of course, are a spokesperson basically for the International Paralympic Committee as well. So how did that, I know and I understand why it happened, because you're so incredibly well spoken and so resilient and strong. I can't even imagine anyone else be doing a better job. But how did that happen? We'll get to Tokyo in a second, but becoming this, like taking the stance, right, on diversity and inclusion and becoming such an important spokesperson for that. Can you tell me a little bit more about that experience?
That began in the quarantine, because back then there were many activities happening. So I asked Craig, my mom asked Craig if, there was anything I could do, anything that I could maybe do to talk to kids around the world and talk to maybe some other youth around the world about maybe keeping positive during the quarantine and, maybe talk about confidence. So Craig reached out to us and he gave me certain projects and opportunities to talk to these people. For example, I was an athlete ambassador from the IPC when I was doing the Alliance and a project with Alliance, where I talked to the youth about confidence. And that was the first of it all. That was kind of the beginning of this whole thing of starting to talk to people and sharing my story. Because I was sharing my story before at the first time I ever shared my story to the rest of the world was at the 2019 World Championships in London. And that experience was amazing. And the feedback that I got was really, really amazing as well. So, I wanted to keep spreading it so that many, many more people get to listen. And so when I got opportunities like that to talk to the youth and also record videos for the UN, it was just it was an eventful quarantine. It was fun, even though it was very sad, but at least there were some positive things that took place. So I'm angry with the coronavirus, but I'm also thankful for it.
No, that's an incredible perspective. And again, just, kudos to you for having such a positive mindset. It really is incredible. And thank you for your advocacy and the work that you're doing. Now, as far as, and of course it was postponed and delayed, and, Japan, of course, went through a lot to be able to put through the Olympics, but put together the Olympics, but also the Paralympics. Talk to me a little bit about the process of you eventually, this with the postponement happening in 2021. Talk to me about the process about getting to Tokyo, and then we'll talk about a little bit of competing in Tokyo as well.
Towards the end of the first quarantine, I was still doing dry runs and keeping fit. And my mom found a small pool in the neighborhood where I could maybe work on my technique again, maybe work on my endurance. My coach was okay with the idea. So he would meet us at the pool. He would do workouts. I would do some interesting warm-ups on the land and do a lot of swimming in the pool to get in the distance that I may have missed, and also work on the technique that, may be destroyed. And so during that period of about 2.5 months, I worked on my speed. And I found that I realized that I could make the time in the 100 meters breaststroke. Because I was swimming in a 25-yard pool, which means I had to swim like 1 minute and 34 seconds to make the time in a 50-meter pool. So making that time was very, very hard. I had to train a lot. I had to eat a specific diet, and I had to avoid some foods or drinks like soda. I wasn't drinking soda at all for like the whole of 2021. And overall, it was just very hectic, but I also really missed the whole environment of competitiveness with my swimmates. I feel you can check on my social media. I have these two swimmates who have basically always been with me since the beginning of quarantine, and I'm very, very thankful for them. Because swimming is the kind of environment where you need support from friends. You need someone maybe to look forward to seeing in the morning. Like, I know he's going to be there, so I have to be there. I'm competing against him. So that kind of mentality and drive made me ready for the Sheffield World Series, where I got a chance to actually qualify. When I went there, I knew I was able to make the time, but I wasn't sure that I would make the time because I was training in a 25-yard pool. So when it came to my race, I dived into the pool, I gave it my all. And, in the video of the race, in the last 15 meters, you could see that I was really pushing really hard. Like, there was a swimmer beside me, Alice Ty. She is an amazing swimmer, British Paralympian, even a Paralympic medalist. So that breaststroke, I knew I had to make it very, very strong. And when I got to the wall, I was just done. I was like, if I've made that time, thank God. If I haven't, maybe next time. So I didn't know what time I made. I couldn't see on the board because I can't see without my glasses. And so when I got out of the pool, I just went and did my swim down, my cool down in the pool. And I found my mom outside, holding my bags. And first question I asked her was, what time did I make? And then she said, she had a very, very happy face. So, I was, maybe hoping I made the exact time, 1:37. That was the qualification time. But then she told me I made a 1 minute and 36 seconds, which is 1 second better. So I was
Amazing.
Like, wow. Sometimes even I wonder how I do certain stuff, because I believe in myself very, very much. I believe that I can do some things very well with dedication, but then there are certain limits that I didn't think I could reach. But then I reached them, and now I know that there is nothing that can stop me. I've been to the Paralympics at the age of 14, and that whole journey was just amazing. So the qualification of the Paralympics, that was a very, very exciting experience. But then when I came back, I had to begin the actual training camp for the Paralympics, the preparations. And that's how the last part of the road to Tokyo began.
And then you're in Tokyo. And tell me about that experience. My goodness, a 14-year-old. I mean, it's mind-boggling. Tell me about the experience.
At the Paralympics, I wasn't the only Ugandan. There were other 4 athletes, para-athletic, para-badminton, and 2 para-athletes. And yeah, I had those guys. They were my teammates. I would talk to them sometimes, but a young kid having a conversation with a very old adult isn't,
Of course,
you probably wouldn't talk about the same topics. But I made new friends. I walked around the village, had an amazing experience. And when I saw the stadium, the swimming stadium for the first time, I was like, whoa, because I hadn't seen a 50-meter pool in over 5 months.
Wow.
And the size, I was imagining what it would be like if there were actual spectators around.
I was just going to ask you.
Which was really sad because, seeing the Olympics or the Paralympics from the earlier years, seeing how everyone is cheering for the athletes, I would have really loved that. But still knowing that my family was back home cheering me on was just enough to keep me going. So seeing the pool was amazing. Training in it was amazing. And then when it came to my race, in the cold room, I was as anxious as I always am before races. I was basically sitting almost right next to some of my idols. My idol, Ellen Keane, she was, right across from me. And I was basically thinking, you know what, this is the moment. There is no one that's going to ruin this moment for you. I had only one race in the Paralympics, and that was the 100 meters breaststroke. And when I got on those blocks, I was like, this is your only race and you can't ruin it. So I made sure I did my best and I improved on my time so that maybe at the next Paralympics or maybe the next championships, actually do maybe come out with a medal.
Wow. So I was just going to ask you as a follow-up, what have you learned at the 2020 Paralympics that you hope to bring with you into the future?
I believe in trusting the process. Because if I had tried to rush things without thinking a lot of what the outcome would be, I probably wouldn't have reached the Paralympics. Because back, things weren't moving as fast as I thought they would. I would train and maybe my time wasn't lowering, and I lost motivation for some time. But then I realized that I should just trust the process, because I made it to the Paralympics and I did my best at the Paralympics. I had the whole experience of the Paralympics, which very few athletes my age get to experience, whether Olympics or Paralympics. So I learned to always have fun as well. Just have fun, live in the moment. And I made lots of new friends, made lots of contacts from other countries. And I look forward to many, many more Paralympic Games.
I mean, the way you're driven and the way, as I said, I mean, your resilience and discipline and just this can-do attitude, I have no doubt in my mind that we'll be seeing you many more to come. So I have no question about that. Back to a little bit about kind of discrimination, inclusivity, whether it's in Uganda, Africa, or the rest of the world. And again, we talk a little bit about the We the 15 campaign, of course, which is an amazing campaign with the International Paralympic Committee participated in as well. What do you think needs to be done? I mean, from a standpoint of, because we talked about impact and how things need to change, a lot of people, again, still are a bit ignorant about the issues with disabilities. What do you think in an ideal world, what needs to be done, in your opinion?
I think there should be disability awareness, where people with disabilities maybe move around communities and talk about what people with disabilities can do, given the opportunity, and how important they can be to society. That's why my mom and I are starting a foundation in Uganda to help out young children, to spread out their stories and talk about how useful they can be to society. Most kids in Uganda are abandoned by their parents if they're born with a disability. So they end up not going to school, having to beg on the streets, which is very, very sad because they have lots of potential. So what we can change is talking more about people with disabilities in schools, in different communities, and also in large companies. Because when people will try to maybe copy from large companies when they hire someone with a disability, they could show up an example to maybe other companies. Just spreading disability awareness, people with disabilities sharing their stories and how it feels to be discriminated. Trying to put yourself in their shoes will give you a perspective of how they're being treated, so that you don't treat them like that. Just treat them equally and just like normal people in society. That's important as anyone else.
Wonderful. And your foundation, for people who are listening, of course, from around the world and watching, how can they get more information? How can they help contribute to your foundation?
We haven't, kick-started it yet, but I'm sure that when it begins, I will post on all my social medias. On Instagram, it's at Husnah Kukundakwe. On Twitter, Husnah Kukundakwe. And I have a Facebook page that's Husnah Kukundakwe. So as soon as it launches, I'll post on all my social medias. And maybe even ask the IPC to help out with promotion. And I look forward to moving around schools. Like recently, I to a French school here in Uganda. Not like talking to people. It's like I'm talking to my age mates, my fellow friends. So it was more just comfortable. I felt more comfortable speaking to them, and actually made lots of friends from that gathering. And I would love to speak to more kids my age, to move to lots of schools and share my story, inspire them, so that maybe they can do whatever they would love to do.
Well, as I said from the beginning of the call, you have a fan here, us at the Institute as well. We'll be doing anything and everything to be able to support you and your mission and your foundation as well. So again, when you travel to the US, you will definitely be able to get together as well. Hopefully, if you can visit the Washington area or elsewhere in the East Coast. But unless you have anything else, this has been just an amazing opportunity to be able to speak with you, hear from you, and really learn more about your inspirational story. And thank you so much for joining us. And I know you still have to have supper, still have to do your homework and everything else, and wake up early tomorrow to do even more training. So thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. And I would love to visit the US one day.
You got it. Thank you so much, Husnah. Take good care of yourself.
You too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a good morning.
Have a good evening. Thank you so much.